Looking to add Chief Revenue Officer to your resume? We're talking all about the evolving role of CRO in this episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning in to Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, Head of Content Marketing for Insightly. Today I'm joined by Mike Weir. He is the Chief Revenue Officer at G2. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey Val, I'm great to be here.
Mike, in 2012, Forbes magazine named the CRO the CEO's secret weapon, and the role has been on the rise ever since. Many of today's organizations have a mix of CMO, CSO, and CRO in the C-suite. Can you talk us through what the C-suite looks like at G2?
Absolutely. So obviously we have our CEO, myself as the Chief Revenue Officer, and then we have Chief Marketing Officer, Chief People Officer, and Chief Product Officer. And very soon we will have an official Chief Financial Officer, currently VP of Finance. And we really look at it from all of the organizational and key functional areas, having somebody that looks after each of those disciplines to make sure that they get the proper voice and focus within the business.
So does the sales function roll up under you as CRO?
It does. Yep. I have sales, customer success, partnerships, revenue operations, and strategy.
Is that typical for a CRO role, or is that just how the chips happen to fall at G2?
I think a lot of it is very similar across other organizations and peers that I talk with. One area that will likely change for us in the future is that the strategy function oftentimes does sit with the chief financial officer as a kind of strategic finance lever, really looking at the long-term projects that can help the business with its growth trajectory, with its productivity goals. But for right now, it reports into me.
Great. So you've been at G2 since 2020, and it looks like you took the CRO role right in the beginning of the COVID shutdown. Can you let me know, how did G2 come around to the idea of having a CRO role?
Yeah. So the role preceded me. There was one of the co-founders that was Chief Revenue Officer before the role opened when he left to be CEO in another company. Really, the impetus was around trying to bring as much standardization, as much scaling effort as possible across all the different revenue and customer support teams. And so rather than just having a bunch of individuals running segments reporting up to like a VP of sales where they would have equivalent titles or directly to the CEO, we wanted to create a C-level role that aggregated all the best practices that helped set the overall global strategy and leverage global processes to help everybody be more efficient and effective as G2 went from, tens of millions in ARR to hundreds of millions in ARR.
Yeah, it's an exciting shift for sure. Mike, as I was doing research for this interview, I learned that there were some elements of confusion between what functions a CRO performs and a CFO performs. Could you give us some distinctions there?
Yeah, I think a CFO and a CRO have to be collaborating a lot. When I look at a CFO, they own the long-term performance metrics of the business. Right? This is informed very much by the CRO and, frankly, by the CMO, who have a good pulse on the market, our customer base, the size of our prospect universe. But the CFO does set the direction of, here's how much revenue we aspire to have. Here's the productivity metrics that we need to be at to not only get to that revenue, but also satisfy our public or private investors. And so they create the framework of what the vision can be for the business to satisfy investors, to keep the business healthy, to be able to reinvest as necessary. And then the CRO owns operationalizing against that strategy, pushing on that strategy even, where sometimes it's like, yeah, I don't think in this current economic environment that we're in right now, I don't think that we can continue growing at 55% year over year, we have to be a little bit more conservative in our growth expectations. And so that counterpoint to what the CFO is setting for the long-term objectives is where the CRO comes in. And then once the plan's locked, it's all about the CRO marshaling the resources, allocating resources, and then getting out there with the team to engage with the customer segments that they believe are going to drive them to deliver on that plan at the productivity metrics that the CFO is setting for the business.
It sounds like it's very much a hand-in-hand relationship. So that's an interesting perspective. Thank you. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a webinar, and I think actually your CEO, Goddard Abel, was one of the guests, and it was about go-to-market. And the big question they were posing was, who owns go-to-market? And during the discussion, it really came out that it was the CEO who owns go-to-market, and then it in turn is executed across teams. When you're thinking about the overall go-to-market strategy, really, does the majority of it sit with the CRO?
It can. It can. And this is, if I'm speaking candidly, sometimes where really strong CRO, really strong CMO, really strong even chief product officer or CEO, that can skew it quite a bit. And an individual that can create a great vision, that can bring people into that vision about what their role needs to be, oftentimes starts to become the person that the rest of the organization leans more towards. I've seen exceptional CMOs have that vision, have that market knowledge, and CRO who has been more than willing to kind of follow some of that lead. In my world, like I spend a lot of my time thinking about where the market's going, what customers need, what prospects need. So I do play a very heavy role in the plan building, in the vision. And I would hope that other CROs are aspiring to do similarly. As I talk to peers, many of them are playing a far more active role in what the not just 12-month strategy looks like, but the next 36-month strategy looks like. They're much more involved in M&A discussions that are going on than potentially in prior lives where it was like, yeah, have the strategy team figure that out and then let me know if we're going to make an offer, and I'll kind of let you know if I agree with it or not. And so I do see the CRO playing a very, very critical role. And hopefully, if they're doing it right, it is a very collaborative process, though, because each leader within the executive team has domain expertise that each role, each function should be learning from. So whether you are a CRO, a sales-led culture, as people talk about, or not, you better be bringing your peers and the cross-functional teams along for the ride.
Great. A lot of times in episodes of Closing Time, Mike, we've talked with folks about the concept of sales and marketing alignment. How does having a chief revenue officer role assist with that sales and marketing alignment?
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite topics. I am a former marketer myself. It's a very unique part of my background as a CRO now. When I think about the CRO and how does it assist, is literally it's just got to be somebody that facilitates internal collaboration. Right? The CRO role now more than ever is a data-driven, strategy-driven type of role. I think when I first came into the workplace 20 years or so ago, it was much more about just, they were the head salesperson. They were out there selling on the road nonstop, meeting with customers, and on occasion working on like, what are the headcount plans? But it's really shifted to empower the teams to work with customers day to day, whereas the CRO is really thinking about the big picture of how to get all the internal support that it's needed, how to create an aligned go-to-market. And so that means myself and our chief marketing officer, we spend a tremendous amount of time together. We build the planning calendar together. We build the templates that our teams use for planning together. We're thinking about and articulating to our teams shared goals that lead to them contributing towards the same outcomes. One of the mantras that we've used sometimes is just one team, one goal. We don't want to have the internal fighting that can sometimes take place when the chief revenue officer is not open with and engaging with the chief marketing officer and the marketing team, isn't acknowledging the contribution that they provide to building the brand, generating pipeline, and creating revenue for the business. And so facilitating that internal relationship, creating shared metrics, celebrating success together are all key things that the CRO does to help drive that sales and marketing alignment.
It's interesting that you mentioned that your background was marketing, because that was my next question. I was going to ask you, is it an advantage for the CRO to come up through a sales organization, a marketing organization, or even something technical like a revenue ops? But it sounds like coming from a marketing background is working out well for you.
Yeah, working out well for me. And then there are folks like my prior life, I was at LinkedIn in the marketing solutions team. We started hiring former marketers to be sales leaders. So myself and a couple others were the first ones hired in 2012, and it was working a lot. I think the unique part about it for the world that I live in, the world that I did live in, coming from marketing meant that I really got the mindset of the customer because I was the former customer. And so coming in as a marketer, I think you have an advantage because you are forced to plan long term. You are forced to track success. You are forced to build and proactively create internal collaboration. Right? As the CRO, folks reach out nonstop and like ask how to help or want to be involved. As the CMO, sometimes you are still fighting for that seat at the table. And so you do need to kind of have great planning capability, great communication skills, really, really active interest in what's best for the business. So I see it as a huge advantage coming from that type of a background to put me in a state of curiosity, proactiveness, a lot of collaboration that helped me greatly as I ramped up and learned a lot of the core principles of being a sales leader. It's not to say that you couldn't go the opposite direction, but I think that growing up in sales, you aren't always pushed as much to be planning and using data for long-term strategy paired with the short-term executional needs of the business.
Got it. So I'll be candid. Do you have the street cred with the sales folks who are pounding the phones, or do they feel like you understand their experience since you came up through marketing and not sales?
Yeah. Maybe the point about not having to do 100 calls a week to customers, I didn't have to go through that, but I get customers really well. I spend a lot of time with customers, and I was a customer. So the vantage point that I can bring to them to help them get in the mindset of a marketer, get in the mindset of a sales persona, even beyond like what they do themselves. How does sales leadership think? How do we make decisions? As they're engaging with their customers, as they're engaging with prospects, does help to show, really the value of, hey, I came from a different background, but I learned a lot of things that you haven't learned along the way. And so we work together to help each other be great at our jobs. And that's, I think just being very customer focused, being willing to get out there, showing them that I can have really positive conversations with customers and push deals forward does build that credibility versus, maybe having this capability, but just not being visible, not being out there. I think that would have been highly detrimental to them feeling comfortable with me knowing what's going on within the business.
Got it. All right, Mike, thanks for joining us on this episode of Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders.
Thanks for having me, Val.
Sure. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell for notifications so you don't miss an episode. We'll see you next time on Closing Time.